everybody. Oh my gosh, what am I in today? What I am in today is a 1988 DeTomaso Pantera. Sorry, for those of you that hate it when I use Italian pronunciation, a 1988 DeTomaso Pantera. This is a GT5 as well. It is a monstrous little thing and I love it already. I've only done about 20 yards. Now, there are a couple of things though to be aware of. The first is that this car has the widest tyres of anything I've ever driven, and it must be one of the widest, just full stop. It's got 285s, I think it's 285s at the front. Even a Countach doesn't have tyres that wide. And also, this is a narrow, bumpy road, so it's not ideal. It's a valuable car, so I am a little bit in awe. This is one of the 8 original right-hand drive DeTomaso Pantera GT5s. So, an extremely rare thing. I'm going to give you a little bit of history, but first of all, just some very slight driving impressions when you're in it. They say they're not good for people who are tall, and yes, that is pretty much true. I'm sort of quite cramped in it, but I can drive it. One of the worst things is just how cramped the pedal box is, because my foot, I've got big feet, size 11s, just keeps on hitting the steering column when I try and brake, which is a little bit disconcerting. But apart from that, it's not too bad. Now, DeTomaso, his dad was Italian, his mum was Argentinian, and he went to Italy sort of in his youth, I think in his early 20s, because he fell foul of the junta that was in Argentina. Now, he came from a good family with money, but he decided to do something with it. And he was a very handy racing driver, even getting to the levels of sort of Formula One. I think he drove for Maserati for a stage as well. And a real character. Anyway, in the sort of 60s, he decided that he was going to have his own car company. He'd already started making some stuff for sort of race teams. But the Vallelunga is the first car that he made, and it was, I believe, also the first production mid-engined car, and it was quite a thing. It only had a Cortina engine, but still, it was a good start. After that came the Mangusta, and that was a bit of a shot across the bows of Shelby, who he worked with briefly, but they were both personalities that were just too big to work together. So the Mangusta Cobra, Mangustas kill Cobras, so after the Mangusta, which is an amazing looking thing, and I'm hoping to get a drive of one of those soon as well, came the Pantera in the early 70s. This is a very late model, but the first models were about $10,000 at launch. So I guess they would have competed at the time with the Dino, the Ferrari Dino, the 246 GT, which however was about a third more expensive at $13,500. So you got a lot of car for your money. Those initial cars, even in the US, with the Ford 5.8 litre V8, had 330 horsepower, which is almost double what the Dino had. And those sort of narrow-bodied cars looked pretty tremendous as well. Tremendous? I don't know, I love it. So, I keep on jumping around, but it's because I'm excited and I want to talk to you about what it feels like to be in this car. And I was really daunted when I sort of first was going to take this out on this road, and I am pretty relaxed now because although it's got those massive tyres, I thought it would be all over the place, and it does follow cambers a little bit, but it's not bad. It's actually really quite easy to drive. Can you believe it? It's because the engine, that monstrous engine, is so torquey that you don't have to worry about that side of things, about changing gear. It will just always go. Now, as I was saying, it's really easy to drive. On this bit, which is bumpy and has much more sort of off camber and stuff, it is pulling a bit more side to side. But all the same, apart from the driving position, which for me is a little bit tricky, it's really not that bad to drive at all. So a little bit about the GT5 in particular. This was 10 years after the first cars, the GT5 came out, and it was thoroughly reworked. Now, I couldn't find anywhere what kind of differences they made to the chassis, but obviously it's a much wider car, and there were some big differences as well to how luxurious they made them. The interiors were much nicer. Leather everywhere, the wood veneer. It even has some marquetry there with the DeTomaso logo, which is pretty amazing. It's a really nice cabin, I have to say. Very, very nice. We're going to get onto a main road now, so I'm going to do a bit of a pull. And I'm hoping, I've got a rear camera, I'm hoping that will pick this up. I'm not sure if it will or not, but if it doesn't, it really doesn't matter, because I'm sure we can hear it in the cabin. It's a very rapid car, but with remarkably little fuss, and I think that's the beauty of these DeTomasos, is that they were kind of, you know, you were competing against Ferrari, and maybe it didn't have quite the same cachet as a Ferrari, but you had an uber cheap, easy to maintain, dependable Ford engine in the back. It also has a ZF transaxle, which was also in the Maserati Bora. Quite simple mechanics, much cheaper to maintain, and still the exotic mid-engined car made in Modena in Italy. So quite an appealing thing, I think. I'm going to turn around here and then we will do another pull up the road. What a fab car. Let's see here. And the turning circle isn't bad at all. Now the clutch is really, it is quite heavy, and also it bites quite far up, so it's quite hard to sort of modulate. Let's go. Are you ready? Boom! The top of it is obscured by the wheel, so I can't quite see what revs I'm doing, but it's an incredibly torquey engine, and revving it through, it doesn't seem, if you rev it all the way through, it doesn't seem to particularly pick up much more at the top end. It's when you change gear and you bang in back into 3000 on full throttle that it really sort of kicks you forward, and it's so flexible. It is absolutely delightful. I haven't driven a Testarossa. I don't know how that would compare. Oh, just got a thumbs up from the from the lorry. But yeah, I don't know how that would compare, but I don't reckon it'll be as easy to drive as this, really. It really is a fab thing. Now, steering is unassisted, and it is pretty heavy. I'm just going to bumble around a bit because I've got like a van in front and I just want it to bugger off, although I don't know if he will. Might have to look at doing something else. Anyway, what was I talking about? The steering. Very heavy at parking speeds with those massive wheels, but manageable. And when you're going, it's absolutely lovely. You've got a little bit of sort of slop off center. I don't think it's slop in itself, but off center it doesn't immediately respond, but as soon as you move it a little bit further, it just sort of catches, and then you get that mid-engine feeling of a car that is very, very happy to change position on the road. The ride really is not at all stiff, and it does seem to corner quite flatly. We'll do a few corners coming up, so we'll see what it's like, but it seems to be pretty well controlled. The brakes are a little bit wooden. They kind of do the job. They don't inspire confidence, but you got to remember that really this was sold in '88, but it's still really at heart a 70s car in technology and all the rest of it. Now the layout of the switchgear is, well, it's interesting, I would say, because you got these sort of dials here with your oil pressure, water temperature, that's the fuel gauge, battery, amps, and then various little switches. They're all here so that you can reach them at least. They may not be organised the best way. The radio lengthwise, which has been done in a few cars, heating controls there. These were also in the Deauville that I drove recently, and I know that they are Ford sort of bits of switchgear, and I quite like them. They're so retro. Even I think by the time they were coming out, they were already quite old. Now that van, I've gone really slowly and he's hardly moved at all, and I'm desperate for these corners because I get a good feeling from this. So although I'm not going to go quick, I want to go through with a little bit of gusto to see how it feels. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull over and wait for a minute. So this is a nice sort of sweeper. Little dip at the bottom, which unsettles some cars. Not going hugely fast, but a little bit of gusto. Round the corner. As I said, off center it's a bit sloppy, but then once it bites, it's quite precise. And even in fourth gear here, you can just ride the torque. Oh, initially it wants to push wide, and I'm really sure that if you had the balls to start pressing on the throttle more at that point, it would probably tighten its line, but I don't really, so I'm not going to do that. So first impression, if you're going too fast, push a little bit wide, but you can tell from the normal sort of changes in direction that it does have that mid-engine feel. The engine is just lovely. It's maybe not, it doesn't sound quite as exotic and weird as some of the sort of Italian engines of that era. I would say it's definitely better than the Dino V6 in terms of sound, but yeah, it's not as exotic certainly as the Ferrari V12s, but then it cost way less. And even some of the Ferrari V8s, I think, are a little bit more special sounding, maybe just because the Cleveland V8 has been in so many American cars, but it still sounds absolutely fantastic. There's also a lack of drama in terms of the crescendo, because it doesn't seem to, you know, it doesn't want to particularly pull harder at the top end. But the torque, oh, it's lovely. I mean, this would make a fantastic GT. Now it is a little bit of a handful sometimes on this bumpy little road. This, which isn't a bit of road designed for this kind of car, let's see how it handles it. Nice and tidy. I mean, it's interesting because the suspension feels so supple, and yet it really doesn't lean. And apart, once you're off center and it bites into the corner, it's really happy to sort of adjust its line. The design of the Pantera, which I think is pretty iconic, was by Tom Chada. Also designer of the Fiat 124, a lovely little design, and the Diablo, so it's got real heritage. And in terms of, you know, one of the big things that people ask is, what is it really an Italian supercar? Because it has that Ford engine, which is sort of blue collar. Well, I think it really is. Everything about it screams Italian supercar, really. And so the engine sounds like an American engine, but that doesn't mean anything. I think this is really an absolutely fabulous marriage of America and Italy, bringing out something that is absolutely brilliant. Now, there were about 7,000 Panteras produced all in all, but the crazy thing is that 5,500 of those were produced between 72 and 75. And that's, the Pantera was made for 71 till 1990 or 92. Now And the reason why that happened is that Ford initially actually bought 80% of DeTomaso in '72. And so they were importing and selling these through their dealers in the US. In '75, I don't know what happened, possibly because of DeTomaso's sort of temperament. Ford said, okay, thanks very much. DeTomaso bought his shares back and Ford stopped officially importing them. They were still sold in the US, of course, but just not through a Ford's dealerships, so they sold less and less. So, look, I've probably forgotten to tell you loads of stuff. I did some research last night, but it's so overwhelming for me to drive cars like this that I get really excited and caught up in the moment, and I just say what's sort of rumbling through my head. So I'm sorry if I've missed stuff. I'm sorry if I've got stuff wrong, which I frequently do. But I really love this car, and I think it is a fabulous alternative. Oh, coming out of corners, that engine with that torque is so lovely. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought again, but I really like it. I really do. I'm going to be doing a video on an early car as well, which is quite a different experience, so that will be interesting. What else can I say? Thank you all so much for watching. I have a Patreon account if you want to support the channel. That's always really helpful, and I produce a video every month, an update video just for Patreon members. And if you've stuck with me up until this point, there's a little added bonus because I'm going to do another run now, just up that hill, another sort of full throttle run as I head back. Let's go. Mark my words. This is still a fast car, even by today's standards. What a thing! So, I don't know, I think I've tried to end this video about 3 times and I haven't, but thank you so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you for the next one. Please subscribe if you haven't already.